Hi there everyone, welcome back to Dandelion Delphi Tutorials. Today we're going to have a look at activity basics. I'll show you the memo. So ideally I'd like you to try it yourself first. If you do not have my book, maybe you can press pause in between. I do show the questions and then try it before you watch the memo. Your first job was to create an interface that looked like this. These were labeled edits, but I didn't change the caption of the labeled edits. In an exam, we are not going to ask you to create a form. You will be provided with files, and then you will just do the coding. In your PAT later on this year, it would be important to change those labeled edits. But at this point, it's just important to name them so that you are able to use them in your code. Now, since you're going to probably run this program more than once to ensure you get the right output, I have then also said that you should place default values in these edit boxes. So I'll quickly show you how to do those. If we go to our form and we click on one of our objects, let's say editing name, you can scroll to the text property and type in there John. And then you do the same for the edit box for the surname, and then you can type in there Smith. So these values that I put there as default values relates to my first set of example of input and output. That means that when I'm going to test my program, I can just run it and the values are there and I just need to click on the process button. I don't have to go and type in everything. It's just the grade there that we would have to change. The first bit of processing that you have to do is in the event form activate. I'm going to remind you how to get there. You single click on the form. Then in your object inspector, you then go to events. Then next to activate, it would be blank. Mine's completed. That's why it says there form activate. It should be blank. You're just going to double click on there. Don't click on the drop down menu. That's incorrect. You just want to double click in that space there. That will then take you to form activate. The question says you want to display today's date. That means you need to use date the function. So we're not going to get input from a datetime picker. There is no datetime picker on the form. We're just going to use date the function. And this here is how you are supposed to display it in the label that we called LBL date. You can see that there's an apostrophe, and I gave you a tip there. I'll show you just now. And that the leading 0 of the 9 is showing. That means I have to use format date time and the full month name and then the last 2 digits of the year. In Appendix A at the back of your book, you will see that the label we use LBL as the prefix. It's often used as output. And the property we use to display is .caption. So that is what we're going to code. LBL date dot caption is assigned to, and this caption property is a string data type. So whatever we put here on the right must be a string. So here we have object name, LBL date dot caption is assigned to, and this is my hard code. I want to put it in quotes. To create the apostrophe S, you have to put 2 single quotes next to each other to create an apostrophe. If you just do that, your program won't run. It's going to give you an error. So for an apostrophe, 2 single inverted commas, then date, colon, and a space, and then I put plus format date time. In the round brackets now, I determine the format that it needs to be displayed in. And remember the 09 was displaying, so that's important to use 2 Ds. The 4 M's so that I can see the full name of the month, and the last 2 digits with a Y of the year. Remember, format date time has 2 arguments. It means we're placing 2 values in these brackets. This first set needs to go into inverted commas as a string, then comma, and I'm using date the function. So if I run it today and it's the 3rd of February, I will see the 3rd of February. But if I run it tomorrow and it's the 4th of February, that is what I'll see. So I'll quickly run the program for you guys, and what you should see there at the top is today's date, colon, and I am running this on the 3rd of February 2022. I now told you to double click on the button Process, BTN Process. So what you're going to do is when you're in your form, you are going to double click on this button, and that is where we code. That is where the code needs to run. Here is the input. In an exam, we won't give you the variables like this. This is just because it's the start and I'm helping you a bit. Remember, our variables will have prefixes. So you can declare these variables according to the prefix. So these with a little s, those would be string, and these with the i's, those would all be integers. Our declaration sits between the procedure and the begin that is provided to us. We start with the var, and remember to indent once with the tab key and then declare your variables. You'll see I have a bit more than what I just showed you because mine is completed, so I have my processing variables in here as well. I then ask you to store the input from the user from the appropriate objects and their properties. So what that means is if you look at your form, you need to get input from all of these objects and store them in the correct variables. Of course, EDT name will go in S name, EDT surname in S surname, and so on. Before you start your input, after your begin, you would hit enter and tab once to place your cursor there, and then 2 forward slashes and input. This is a comment to indicate this is my input. To get input from strings are very simple. We put the variable on the left. Remember, a value, the right side gives a value to the left. So I have S name is assigned to the name of the object I'm getting the value from, EDT name, and the property that I'm going to use, .text. These first two lines are very similar. They both have string input and they both come from the edit box.text. We have string. Remember, the text property is string on the right, string on the left. That's compatible. We don't need any conversions. Then we made use of a spin edit for the grade. So a spin edit has a .value property, and the value property is an integer data type. I need to store the grade in an integer variable iGrade. If I have integer on the right, integer on the left, it's compatible. I have no problem with that. So that's how we get input from a spin edit. Now we get to the last ones, and that would be the number of school days. If you read the question, that's how many days has passed up to now for this year. Then your practical mark and your theory mark. So there is, I just used IYOB for the year of birth. Did I skip one there? Yes, there's the year of birth. There's the year of birth at the top. We don't have to do them top to bottom. I just group them together with the ones that are using the same type of code in my input. So I get the input from the year of birth, and it comes from the edit box called edtyob.text. Now text, remember, is string. IYOB is integer, and now they're not compatible. So I have to what they call typecast. We're changing the value from a string to an integer. And then in these brackets, I place my object and the property. So I start with what it is. It is string. I want to change it to an integer to store it in my integer variable. You will now follow the same process for iPassed, Prac, and Theory using the correct objects on your form, and all of them are integers. They're all getting values from a text property, which is string, so each one of them would need string to int. Now we are asked to do some processing, and again, just for this activity, I have provided you with some variables. These are just to give you ideas of what variables could look like. Remember, it is up to you to choose an appropriate variable name. I suggest you don't make them too long. Start them with a data type that they are, a little prefix, lowercase, and then a capital letter, and then a short descriptive name. So these you can declare, And remember, we don't have to declare all our variables at once. We can always go back. So if we go to the code, you are able to go back and declare the variables as they are needed. One data type on a line. And just a reminder, every line of code ends with a semicolon. In an exam, you will have reading time and you will read the whole question. But once you start coding, deal with one bullet at a time. Especially in grade 10, you have to follow the instructions from top to bottom, because sometimes something that we need to calculate here needs some of the processing to be done there. So let's look at how to calculate someone's age. You know that if I give you my year of birth, you could take 2022 and you can deduct my year of birth from there, and you will know how old I'll be at the end of this year. Before you start your processing, leave one line open between input, 2 forward slashes, and then type processing. So the age needs a value, my integer variable, and I can calculate it by assigning it to 2022 and deducting from that I, Y, or B that received a value here at the top. Just a little tip, if a variable needs to be used here on the right of an assignment statement, it would have to receive a value above this line on the left of the assignment statement, else it has no value to deduct from here. This is what we're going to do next in our next lessons, using functions, built-in functions from Delphi. There is a function called current year, and this is wrong. That must be I, Y, or B. I can actually, current year takes the integer value of today's year. So that would be, if I run it in 2022, it would be 2022 minus I, Y, O, B, the variable. So 2022 could be replaced with current year, but that we'll learn more about in our next lessons. The next bullet asks us to calculate the number of full years to matric. So if I'm in grade 10, my grade 10 year isn't a full year. I only have grade 11 and 12 that is full years left, because some days have passed already this year, so it's not a full year. So if I take 12 minus 10, I'll get 2 full years. If I was in grade 11, it would be 12 minus 11, and that would be 1 full year. If I was in grade 12, 12 minus 12 is 0, so it would be 0 full years. And your code should work for any input, not just for the one example where we enter a grade 10 learner's information. I'm adding some extra empty lines here, but that is just for the purpose of this video. You don't have to do that. Your processing can be underneath each other without the empty lines. So now I year is the variable that I need to use to store how many full years are left. So that's on the left of the assignment statement. And I take 12 minus their current grade. You cannot use their year of birth here because maybe they went to school a year early, or maybe they failed a year. So the grade is our best option to use here. So if I was in grade 10, it would be 12 minus 10, and that would give me an answer of 2, which is correct. The next bullet is asking me when their matric year would be. So if you are in grade 10 in 2022, you would be in grade 12 in 2024. I am storing this answer in iMatric variable, the integer variable. And here what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this answer here, because this is how many full years are left. So if I take 2022, the year I am in now, plus 2, that would then give me 2024. That would be for a grade 10 learner. Let's say it was a grade 12 learner. Remember, this would be 0, because 12 minus 12 would be 0. 0 plus 2022 would be 2022, so that would be correct. The next bullet asked us how many school days are left to the end of the matric year. Each year has 197 school days. But remember, in our input, we had how many years. Let me just move this over. How many school days have passed already? You are now in grade 10, and some days have passed already. So you don't have, for this year that you are in, you don't have 197 left. Let's say 7 passed. Okay, so in my I passed as input, I would have entered 7, and now I can deduct from that 7. So that leaves me for this year, my grade 10 year, with 190 days left. So that would be this part here. I am determining how many days are left of the year I am in. So many days have passed already. So I'm taking 197 minus what the user entered in our example. That would be the 7. However, I still have, if I'm in grade 10, I still have my grade 11 and 12 year left as well. And this was determined here. So if I was in grade 10, 12 minus 10 was 2. And I still have 2 full years left. So that's why I'm taking I year. In a grade 10 example, that would be 2 times by 197. And I'm adding these two together to store the number of days left till the end of grade 12 in I days. Let's take the grade 12 example. So this, remember, would be 0. So if I calculate this 0 times 197, this part here would give me an answer of 0. So all I have left, if I'm in grade 12, is the 197 minus how many days have passed already this year. Our next question is asking us to calculate the average mark for term 1. The user have entered the practical and the theory mark, and we have to calculate the average, storing it in R average. This is again a reminder and something that you really need to know by now. When we're using a divide on the right of the assignment statement, the answer on the left will always be real. To calculate an average, we just add the two values together if there were only 2. So here we add the two values together. Very important is that you put the brackets around them so they are added up first. And then we divide by how many values did we add together for an average. Now we only added up 2, so that would be divided by 2. And because of this divide here, this here must be a real variable. You will see that I tell you every now and again in the book that the program ran in a certain year or on a certain date. The reason for that is that the age would differ. Obviously, this guy that was born in 2004 was 16 in 2020. However, if I run it in 2022, he's 2 years older. In the book and also in exams, there's a reason why there's more than one example of input and output. Is to ensure that your code doesn't only work, for example, for a grade 10 that was born in 2004, but it would also work for another grade and another user's year of birth and marks and so on. When you need to do your output, so that's the next part of the question, is to display the output, make sure you look at little details, and I'll zoom in so you guys can see better. There we have J. Smith, but John Smith was entered. So you must make sure that you're only showing the first initial and the dot and a space and Smith. Then we have these labels. Don't be lazy with the labels. They are worth marks, and those are actually easy marks, and this is what I refer to as hard code. Age, matric year, school days left, and IT mark. Next to them then, I need to place the variables that will show me these answers. Another important thing to look at in this question is there's a little percentage sign after the value and 2 decimal places are displayed. Something else that you need to take notice of is that every output is at the top of a rich edit. So that means that there was a lines.clear above the output. After my processing, before I display, I cleared the memo. This is a memo in this case, or it could have been a rich edit as well. But I cleared it and then I displayed. After your processing, you'll leave one line open, 2 forward slashes, and a comment showing output. This was a memo, but a memo works the same as a rich edit that we used before. It is memo output. That's what I called my memo, .lines.clear, to clear it first before I display. Now we're going to continue with the same line of code, memo output.lines.add round bracket. Remember our label, if we go back, that needed an assignment statement. A memo needs brackets. So that's what you guys need to study. Then I want to show just the initial of the person, so the name that was stored in SName with square brackets 1 to get hold of only the first character. Then plus my hard code is that full stop and the space between the initial and the surname. And then the surname, very simple to display our output when it's just strings. Everything inside of these brackets needs to be string. And here's my hard code in inverted commas. I have comma, age, colon, space, and a comma. Now to display an integer, so I calculated IH there, now I need to display it. To display an integer in a string property, I need to change it from an int to a string. In the brackets, I then put IH. What is important is that into string has open brackets and closed brackets, but then we also have an open bracket and closed bracket here for the memo. Same for rich edits. The same process needs to be followed for matric year and for school days left, using the appropriate variables that we have used up here at the top. So there you can see all your variables. There's I year. I need to display I matric, I days, and now I'm going to display our average, which follows a different format. We have the memo, we still have our label and a plus. Then we're going to use float to string, and very important, F standing for format. Then our variable. Now this, remember we speak about arguments on the inside. Float to string F has 4 arguments. 1, 2, 3, 4. RAVG. Then here, that's the variable that we want to display. Here we then either use FF fixed or FF currency. If it's a normal number, like we have here, just a number, not a currency, not a rand value, then I'll use FF fixed. If it was a rand value, I would use FF currency. Then comma 10, and later I'll explain to you guys what that means, but you can always use comma 10 there. And then comma 2, which indicates that it should display 2 decimal places. And remember we had the percentage sign there at the back, that you would have to add. So in my code, after float to string F, after I've closed the bracket of float to string F, I then put plus and hard code in inverted commas, my percentage sign, and then only do I close the bracket for the memo. Now you need to test your program. You can enter in John Smith to determine if the age is calculated correctly. I suggest that for this one here, enter your own year of birth and see if you get the correct age. You can then use 10 and 6, 70 and 80. The rest of it should all be the same. It's just the age, because this program ran on a different date, the age would be different. So I'm going to show you guys, if I type in that with 2004 in here, my grade is 10, and I click on process, this guy here is 18, because now I ran it on the 3rd of February 2022. However, the rest, and the matric year would be different as well. So put in your details and see if you get the right answers there. The school days left and the percentage, that should still be the same. So, and then very important is to test SUHEC here as well, with the different values, with the grade, the school days, and the practical and the theory mark, to see if your output looks exactly like this. Thank you guys for watching Dandelion Delphi tutorials. Please leave some comments if anything is unclear or you have some other questions. For more information and activities on question 1 of our grade 12 exams, that's really what we're covering in grade 10. Grade 10 we're covering what can be asked in grade 12 in question 1. All of that information you can find in Dandelion Delphi book 1. Keep practicing and hope to see you soon.